Welcome back to a Book a Day podcast. I am back with another book this time, and the book is called Heartbreak. It's from the School of Life, and this one is really short. And when I say short, I mean really, really short. So much so that I'm going to narrate it in just a couple of short episodes. Sounds interesting, right? But of course, the topic is not so positive. It's something that speaks about our pain, one of the most painful experiences of life, that is heartbreak. But I think this book is going to be of real help when it comes to understanding the heartbreak and going through it. So, without any delay, let me start narrating the first part of this book called Heartbreak. Introduction. They used to love us. We used to have a future. We would fall asleep in their arms. We shared our fears and gave them a map to our insecurities. We loved their sense of humor and perspective on our lives. We traveled with them, understood their feelings for their parents, perhaps even decorated a home together. They were our best friend. And now we are devastated. We dignify this special pain with a powerful name, heartbreak, because it simply feels as if something essential, something fundamental in us has shattered. We struggle to describe quite what we are going through. Sometimes, for a few hours, it seems we will almost cope. Then we are abruptly reminded that everything good has gone from the world. What we feel most of all is alone. Alone with the sadness and confusion, the anger and the incomprehension. One of the biggest ambitions of art has been to meet us in the dark, to join us when we are broken and lost, and to remind us of things which at this moment we find hard to see, that our pain makes sense, that we are still viable, lovable people, that we will recover, and that however individual the precise details of our suffering may be, we are in fact participating in a sorrow that is common to many. Everyone we admire, everyone we find interesting, has had or will have their heart broken. Our heartbreak seems to cut us off from the rest of humanity. Secretly, it brings us closer together. What follows is a journey around the universal story of heartbreak. Chapter 1. Why did they leave us? They have gone, and what we need most of all is to understand why. What is striking is that despite what friends and well meaning acquaintances tell us, we already know. It is us. We firmly and naturally assume that the explanation has to do with our miserable failings, our dispiriting character, and our wearisome appearance. They've gone because we were not good enough. They got to know us intimately, far better than almost anyone else has ever done, and then, inevitably, they saw the truth behind our characters and were horrified. It is not the relationship that failed. We failed. But, counterintuitively, what seems most obvious to us in our hearts might not actually be true. There's a famous experiment in the history of psychology which pinpoints our tendency to project. That is, to read decisive, clear explanations drawn from our minds into what are, in fact, ambiguous situations in the world beyond us. The thematic apperception test, TAT, as it is technically known, was developed in the 1930s by the American psychologist Henry Murray. It presents us with a series of images and asks us to say what is going on. People tend to have quite specific ideas of what is happening in each scenario. For example, based on the picture described here, a number of conclusions could be drawn. 1. She is fed up with him, he is weak and a bit boring. 2. She has just told him that their relationship is not working and that she is leaving. 3. He has just told her they have to break up and the reason has something to do with their sex life. He is not as fulfilled as he wants to be. 4. It seems to be about his parents. She wants him to distance himself from them. If he doesn't, she cannot be expected to stay around forever. The power of the experiment derives from the fact that the image has, by design, no definite significance. They are just actors carefully asked to assume certain ambiguous poses. The stories and the meanings come from us. This is often exactly what happens around our own heartbreaks. We may never actually know precisely why the other person left us. However well we know someone, they are never fully transparent to us. What they say may be only a part of what is really on their mind. Their deeper motives remain obscure, perhaps even to them. We are presented with the fact they have left us, and onto that we project a meaning. But the meaning we give to the fact comes in large part from us. Admitting to ourselves that we won't always understand another person's inner workings is an underused and powerful skill. At one of the foundational moments of philosophy in ancient Athens, Socrates argued that a huge component of wisdom lies in our capacity to accept our ignorance in certain situations. He said, "The wise know when they don't know." This recognition of not knowing and the reminder of our tendency to project may be helpful in easing us away from the more catastrophic and self-incriminating interpretations of a breakup. The lover who furiously told us they never wanted to see us again may, in the hidden recesses of their soul, have actually been thinking, "I'm so sad this did not work out. I wish I could find a way to make this work. You are so lovely in many ways, but there is something desperate in me that's turning away from your offer of love." The person who coldly texts us, "That's it, I'm out," may behind the scenes be weeping at their own sense of loss and failure rather than gleefully celebrating the end of their overextended encounter with us. The person who says, "I wish this could work, but I've got to concentrate on my career," might actually be sincere rather than putting a polite cover over their contempt for us. The acceptance of ambiguity is liberating. We are free to recognize that the ending wasn't necessarily all our fault, that there may have been forces at work other than our own inadequacy. We are still very sad, but the target of our misery is a little more bearable. We can focus on the deep, sorrowful strangeness of love and loss rather than suffering an extended, excruciating confrontation with our own inadequacies. Chapter 2: Unfair Dismissal in Love. Our lover has wounded us deeply. Our suffering is comparable to being robbed or physically assaulted. In a way, this hurts more than someone stealing our phone or bicycle. However, in those cases, there are big societal mechanisms for addressing our suffering. There are insurance companies, police forces, courts, and ultimately prisons designed to restore justice. If an employer suddenly decides that they cannot stand us, they usually cannot indiscriminately drop us. All kinds of rights and safeguards have been slowly and wisely established to protect our employment from whims and cruelty. Culturally, we have focused our collective systems of justice and redress around money, work, and property. But in an area that matters just as much to us, love and relationships, that is, we cannot contact a lawyer or go to the police station with an accusation that someone broke our heart. We are on our own. Not only is there no easy way of getting redress, there is little on offer to help us with the pain. If we have a toothache or a broken leg, we are met by a society that has enveloped sophisticated ways of dealing with the problem and built enormous institutions to offer us skilled help. The point is not that we should be able to go to a lawyer or a doctor with our complaint. We don't want our ex partner to be locked up or to undergo some emergency surgery. But we can, in a utopian spirit, imagine a society that has devoted itself with equal ambition and over many decades to address the intense common problems of wounded souls. The broken heart specialist of the future would carefully listen to our sobs. They might prescribe that we read a particular book or listen to certain pieces of music. We could be invited to examine our expectations of relationships and be coaxed gently but firmly towards an understanding of just what went wrong and what we could learn. We might be prompted to reconsider what kinds of people to be wary of or to seek out as we re enter the world of romance. It has always been hard for us to imagine large societal responses to private problems, just as in the 17th century it was hard to imagine the existence of a reliable fire brigade. Relationship endings are standard hazards of existence, and perhaps at some point in the future, people heading off to their broken heart specialists will look back on us with pity because when our relationships failed, there were not so many places to turn for wisdom, consolation, and guidance. Chapter 3: The Psychology of Our Exes. In the immediate circumstances of a breakup, we are likely to be focused on what happened in the last few weeks or months to explain the end of a relationship. But the clue to the failure often has nothing to do with us, and indeed little to do with the actions and feelings of the ex in the present moment. The reason why it all collapsed may lie in their childhood and in the long and typically unexplored path of their psyche towards emotional maturity. Frustratingly, the way people love as adults sits on top of their experiences of love in their early years, and the capacity to be a reliable and contented partner is in part due to things having gone well with parental figures at the start of their lives. Unfortunately, for relationships, at least half of the population is walking around with and falling in love while beset by a host of uncharted psychological issues that will make it hugely difficult for them to be predictable and well attached in relationships. Often, what they ostensibly seek in love is exactly what in the long run they cannot accept, for it feels unfamiliar, threatening to their defenses, and unearned. There is a conflict of which we end up the unwitting victims between what they say they seek in a partner and what they are in fact psychologically capable of accepting. Perhaps a beloved parent was rather aloof or often absent in their childhood. When they grew up and began seeking love, the ex may have been drawn to the warmth we offered them. But at the same time, our tenderness would have felt unfamiliar and been perceived as extremely threatening to parts of their personality. They may have struggled to understand what was going on inside themselves when they went cold and had to take their distance from us, but they lacked the tools. It may in the end have felt easier for them to blame us for being needy rather than explore the complicated reasons why their own need was frightening to them. They were replicating a past, doomed and painful version of love without either of us quite knowing. Or maybe our ex had a parent who was rather fragile or depressed or was impatient or easily irritated. As a result, they learned to be exceedingly cautious around them, always pleasing and putting others' interests first, and never quite letting on what was happening in their hearts, growing isolated and resentful instead. They gravitated towards us, hoping that we would allow them to be themselves. But while we did our best, dynamics kicked in which meant that they never dared to explain their desires to us properly. They hid what really worried them. They buried away their hurts. They did not complain as and when they should have done, and eventually they lost the capacity to feel alive in the relationship. These thoughts chip away at our worst, most self punishing interpretations of what happens in our relationships that fail. It is not, as we so quickly fear, that we are invariably revealed as defective, but rather that we have been co opted into another's fateful private love dramas, which had their beginnings long before they met us. They did not manage to love us, but probably they couldn't, at this stage in their emotional evolution, love anyone that well, given the burden bequeathed by their unexplored past. One of the key questions we should ask a prospective partner on an early date is, how did things go in your childhood? It is often deeply touching to hear that there was pain and loneliness. We may long to fix them and sincerely believe we can, but given the brevity and inherent complexity of existence, we might be better off shedding some of our attractions to movingly damaged people in favor of those who will boringly but beautifully love us as we hope and deserve to be loved. Chapter 4. Why did we pick them? They were perhaps in the end not really the right person to pick. As we can see now, they came with a host of problematic points that we would have been wise to steer clear of. But at the same time, we should graciously accept that we didn't stumble into error by chance. We made a mistake because we often feel actively drawn to the wrong people. The standard view is that we seek happiness in love, but what it seems we actually seek is familiarity, which may well complicate any plans we might have for happiness, for we are not always familiar with what is good for us. We may unconsciously long to recreate in our adult relationships some of the feelings we knew in childhood. It was as children that we first came to know and understand what love meant. But unfortunately, the lessons we picked up may not have been straightforward. The love we knew then may have come entwined with more than just kindness. It may have been coupled with a feeling of being controlled or humiliated, being abandoned, never communicating, in short, with suffering. As adults, we may then reject potential partners not because they are wrong, but because they are too well balanced, and their rightness feels unfamiliar and somehow oppressive. We may call these kind people boring or unsexy and instead head towards people who our unconscious senses will frustrate us in familiar ways. We make mistakes because deep down we don't ultimately associate being loved with feeling entirely satisfied. Knowing that we don't choose our partners freely can help to dampen our annoyance with those we end up with and who hurt us badly. We were not merely stupid, we were constrained by our childhood history of love. Hopefully, the more we understand why certain problematic candidates felt attractive, the more we can free ourselves from their appeal. As we start to grasp how our childhoods gave us unhelpful templates for love, we can free ourselves from their influence and learn to choose partners who can more properly satisfy our adult hopes for happiness and fulfillment. So, with that, I'll take your leave for today and I'll continue reading this book in the next episode. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you'll keep joining and keep supporting. Thank you very much.